Okay, well, welcome, formal welcome. This is the CLA webinar, How to Start a Laundromat. And we've got a lot to cover in the next little while, so I'm going to get us started. A little bit of housekeeping. We're using the Zoom webinar platform, so you've got a toolbar that you can make use of. You can see that a number of people are just saying hi in the chat, but also find the question and answer box, because that's going to be the best way to get questions to me and to our special guest, who I'll introduce in just a moment. All your questions along the way, and this is a lot more fun as a Q&A than a lecture. So I've got plenty of prepared material to share, but again, we want to make sure that we're getting your questions answered about getting into the laundry business. So, ATL showing up here, Yvette. That's good. Good stuff. So, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get us kicked off here. So let me begin with who are we and what are we doing here? So we're coming to you from CLA, which is the nonprofit trade association serving the laundromat industry. We've been doing this for almost 65 years as an organization. And our main role is to provide education, networking, advocacy, support, really all things to help nurture, steward, and grow the laundromat industry. And so we're a membership organization. We'll talk some more about that here along the way. And we provide a lot of resources as we help you connect, learn, and advocate for the industry. Shawan, yes, we will share the presentation. We are recording right now, and we will make the recording available afterwards. So you can take notes if you want, but also know that you'll have a copy of this that you can reference and share. You may have partners, other people you want to share the information with. So please feel free to do that. As a few more people are joining, I'll just reiterate that find the question and answer tool and be typing in your questions like Shawan just did, and we'll be taking those as we go through along the way. Katisha from Atlanta, good to see you. Spearfish, South Dakota, that's a first. Welcome, Rick and Toinette. Good stuff happening. Okay, well, let's jump in. And let me introduce myself, and then we'll introduce our special guest today that's going to help us navigate kind of this introduction to the laundry business and being able to really better understand the industry, which is our goal today. And before I say anything further, I just want to reiterate that we're not here to recruit you into the business. We're not here to sell you on the business. We love the business, and we're going to tell you about that part for sure. But we also want to just kind of tell you like it is, right? And there's so much information out there now about our industry, a lot of which is super helpful. Some of it might be a little bit off target. And so we just want to make sure that you walk away from today having a better understanding of what's going on in the business. Rocky, hello from Southern California. Welcome aboard. So my name is Brian Wallace. I serve as president and CEO of CLA. So I've been a part of this trade association staff for more than 32 years. And so I've had an incredible opportunity to work with many, many thousands of laundromat entrepreneurs, lots of folks in your stage where you're doing some homework and some research and trying to understand it better, but also folks that are very well experienced that also have a lot to share. And so my main role is to sort of keep my eyes and ears open and synthesize some of the best practices and what we're learning throughout our knowledge base as an industry. And to help me do that is I have a very special guest, Yvette Morton Williams. She, among other things, is a member of our board of directors as a volunteer, including on our executive committee. So she is a very busy volunteer with the association, but she's also an owner-operator herself. And Yvette, welcome. It's great to have you with us as a special guest. And you want to take a few minutes and let the group know a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited to have an opportunity to speak with everybody. I wish I could see your faces, but
They're out there, you bet. There's
yeah, no,
lots of
you're
them
out
out
here. I
there.
see the chat blowing up, and that's so
Yeah.
good to see. So,
Mhm.
like Brian said, I'm Yvette Morton Williams. I've been in this industry for almost 15 years now, and I can't believe it because it's really flown by really quickly. Grew up in Chicago and was living in New Jersey and moved down here right at the start of my laundromat career. So that was January of 2010. And my husband and I bought an existing store, and we liked it so much that about 7 years later, we got another one, and then we just continued to grow. So right now we're right at about 5 stores, all in Metro Atlanta area. And I love it. I've been on the board for a little while now. I don't know, about 4 years, I
Four
think.
or 5 years,
Yeah,
yeah.
4 or 5 years. It's gone really quickly, and it is a pleasure to be here and to help in any way I can. So thank you for the warm welcome, Brian.
Well, of course, Yvette, you're as good as it gets, and really appreciate you being on here and having a practitioner, someone who's out there doing it every day, would be really enlightening for all of our newbies along the way. So I'm going to just remind you one more time, avail yourself of the question and answer function here on Zoom. Barbara, I see you have a question teed up that I'll get to here in just a moment. But feel free to say hi to each other in the chat, but let's put our questions in the question and answer box, and that'll help us here as we go along. So let's get into some basics, right? Let's do some table setting. Like, what is this that we're talking about? So laundromat, coin laundry, laundrette, washateria, lavanderia, coin op, coin laundry. We're all talking about the same thing. We're talking about the neighborhood laundromat. And we're talking about a retail space where customers are primarily coming in to do their laundry on a self-service basis. We're not talking about the vended laundry equipment that you would find in an apartment or a dormitory or some other kind of multifamily setting. We're really just talking about kind of the store. So you'll hear me say store, store, store. That's kind of like this retail vernacular that we tend to use for our business. There's about 29,000 stores. It's kind of a little bit of a moving target as stores come and go, and a very fragmented industry at that. Conservatively, 5 to 6 billion in sales. Honestly, probably closer to 9 or 10 billion, but we'll keep it there just to be a little bit conservative with some of the numbers. You can imagine, as a trade association, we do benchmarking surveys on an annual basis. And so some of the data that I'm going to be referring really comes from some of the research that we have done and share out with the industry. So the statistical average store is at 2,850 square feet. But the reality is that these stores range in size based on kind of the market demand. Maybe a rural setting might have more like 1,000 square foot store. Maybe more of a typical location would be in that 2,500 to 3,000 square foot range. We certainly have members that have giant stores that are in densely populated urban areas that could be 8 or 10 or even 12,000 square feet. So there's no wrong answer there. It's just a matter of serving the market. And Yvette, you mind sharing maybe a little bit of a range of the square footage among the 5 that you operate?
Yeah, we go from under 2,000 to about 5,300 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And does that sound right to you in terms of, the larger store maybe is in a little bit busier area, and sometimes it's just a matter of what you can find. That's a open spot
That's
to
so
build a
true.
store.
That's so true. It's a matter of what you can find, but I would agree with that. Even though our smallest store is in a pretty densely populated area, but it just worked out well. We found a place that had real estate available, and it was not huge, but it was our opportunity to become commercial landlord, so we took it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk some more about that as we go too, about the
Mhm.
opportunity to control the real estate when you can, because that's an important factor for a lot of our members. And in terms of the locations themselves, you know, we have majority of our members are leasing their space. They're renters. They're on a lease with a commercial landlord. Of course, others, as we just heard, there's an opportunity to control the real estate. That's considered ideal, but it's not always available or affordable or those opportunities may not always come your way, but just know that both are very viable and welcomed opportunities in the business. We'll talk more about the consumer as we go along here, but if I was to kind of just try to boil it down to a couple of key factors, our primary customers, everyone has laundry, that's the good news, but our primary customer is that lower to middle income renter, typically with families. So these are people that either don't have a washer in their living space or can't afford their own washer dryer, or maybe again, be in one of these apartment settings where the equipment's not adequate. It's too small, or there's too many people sharing it, and they needed a better place to go. So upwards of 20 million families are coming to see us every week. And increasingly, we're seeing more homeowners come do business with us on this manner of time savings and convenience. And Yvette, I bet you see some homeowners come your way trying to get it all done at once.
Absolutely. And we tell people all the time when they say, I haven't been to a laundromat, I've got washers and dryers at home, a washer and dryer at home. And we'll always tell them that we get a lot of people that have their own home for many reasons. They let it build up. They don't want to spend all day Saturday doing load after load after load. And our space allows them to come in and get it all done within an hour and a half and be on and take the kids to the soccer game or whatever else they plan to do that day. And then we also get people that have those things that just won't fit in their home
Right.
machines. Their dog beds, their horse blankets, their large blankets for their beds, especially this time of year where the seasons are changing. So absolutely, it's not just for people who don't have washers and dryers at home.
No, well
Mhm.
said. Yeah, we love to see those comforters. Bring them on, bring
Yes.
them in. Barbara, let me catch up with your question. Your question, again, for those of you that are participating, there's a question and answer chat, and it's a good place to put your questions in that I can see on my screen. So, Barbara, what can I do to get information about site and finance concerns? So, there's a couple of things I want to share, and this kind of relates to a couple of the answers that we're likely to give here, is that of course, the association at laundryassociation.org is a good resource to learn more about the industry. Oftentimes when it gets into specific site and finance, you're often going to be working with what I'll call a commercial laundry equipment distributor. And these would be the local companies. I just happened to be visiting one in Dallas, Dallas today, where there's a sort of a range of services that a typical laundromat distributor would be able to provide to you. And it's sort of a scope, and some will take advantage of some or all of these different services, but it can begin with a introduction to the business. It can be begin with helping to find a site or vet a site based on the demographics and a competitive analysis. It could be building out a pro forma for a potential store. What might be the sales revenue opportunities? Perhaps a basic layout of how much equipment you would need and how it'd be situated. It may be sort of vetting that store and whether it's going to be a green light or a red light. Then helping you access the financing that you're going to need, and we'll spend some more time on financing here in a little bit. Oftentimes, these same distributors will either have referrals to make for general contractors and or trades to build your store, or they may be in a position to do it for you themselves, depending on what they're offering and what their capabilities are. Installing the equipment, testing the equipment, getting you ready for the grand opening, and then perhaps even service after the sale and some other things. So, Barbara, your question about site and finance, those are, there's a good opportunity to kind of talk about the role of the distributor right at the top. And full service distributors will do lots of those things that I just mentioned. And in terms of how they're organized, is that each of the major brands of washers and dryers as manufacturers will have authorized distributors in given territories, right? So Yvette's in Atlanta, there's a dealer for washer A, B, C, D, E, and F, and they will be the local representative of that brand. And these are the folks that you're going to want to chat with as you're getting started in the industry to try to sort of evaluate how your needs line up with their services, get a sense of who you want to do business with or not. And like I said, that's kind of a explanation I like to get to at some part of our conversation, because yes, there's a sales function. They'd love to sell you some washers and dryers, but there also is a level of expertise and an array of services that they bring to the market as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense, Barbara, and I see that you got another question in the queue that we'll get to in just a moment. Yvette, anything you wanted to add to that distributor question?
Well, yeah, you said a lot there, and I agree with all of it. I would say that successful operators often have really, really good relationships with their distributor. Your distributor will be your kind of de facto business partner. You want to make sure
Very
that you
true.
have somebody that you trust. So not just the equipment that they sell, but do you feel like this is somebody that will be there for you? Do you trust them? Do you feel like they're telling you the truth, or are they just trying to sell you something? That's really important, especially when you're starting. But if you intend to grow in the industry, your distributors will often be the place where you can go to find out great sites or what's for sale, even before it's really officially for sale, because they will likely have good relationships with a lot of operators and not just you.
Yeah, it's really an interesting dynamic, right? Because there's, like I
Mhm.
said, there's a sales consideration, a sales relationship. There's also a business relationship, and often a personal relationship that develops.
Absolutely.
And they're very much eyes and ears, because that's their job, right? They're out there pounding the pavement every day and understanding what's going on in your market. We have a directory of these distributors on our website at laundryassociation.org that you can search by state and get a handle on those that are members of the association.
Yeah, and it's funny, Brian, you mentioned pounding the pavement, and I think I know a lot of people that own laundromats, and that's kind of what we do too, right? We go and we pop in. You'll find us on vacations going into laundromats, and but the distributors do that too. So they tend to love the business, so they love it. They like going into stores. They like knowing what's new, and they'll know all of the stores in your geography probably better than most people. So really good. That's a really important first step, is to find a good distributor and develop relationship with them.
Yeah, yeah. And again, we've got relationships with these folks too. We're brand agnostic as
Yep.
an association, but we have relationships, and I connect, especially new members, with distributors in their particular area all the time. So we have those relationships that we can kind of help jumpstart for you. Um, okay, let's kind of jump into this next section. Like I said, we're not here to sell you on the business. We love the business, but we're going to kind of give you the straight scoop on it. And the next section I sort of have divided up in some reasons why our members love the business, why it's a great business, why people are attracted to it, why you might want to pursue more research into that space. But then I'm going to offset that with some of the challenges, potholes, obstacles. Yvette's probably got a war
The
story.
good, the bad, and the ugly, right?
The bad and the ugly. But again, that's why you joined us
Right.
today, right? Is to hear
Exactly.
the real
Exactly.
scoop. So so let's jump in. And I see Barbara's got a question, and Morgan, and so I'll keep an eye on that. And we'll jump back to you here, but we'll get through a little bit more content here. So probably first and foremost, we're providing an essential service. Everybody's got dirty clothes. Everybody needs to do wash, and that's a really good place to begin with any business. And through whether it's the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, or the pandemic experience, none of us would like to go through that again. But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that laundromats held up pretty darn well. And as I like to say, in 2008 and 9, flat was the new up, right? If we were kind of holding our own, we were outperforming just about anything you could find. And so we do have that resistance to some of those downturns. And of course, the pandemic was entirely unique, but we were able to lobby and keep our doors open as an industry and continue to take care of people with that essential service. So recession resistant for sure. And I'm going to tee this up and let Yvette add to it. There's a lot out there about absentee, passive, easy, a lot of descriptions of the industry that I just don't feel are terribly accurate. You can optimize your time. You can create systems to streamline. But I think it's fair to say that there's a simplicity to the business, but that doesn't mean easy. Simplicity meaning the keys to success are kind of evident. Great location, keep it immaculately clean, make sure all the machines are running, have friendly service, like I said, convenient location. But but that's could be hard to execute on all those factors, you know. So Yvette, what do you say when people come to you and say, is this absentee? Is this a passive business? What is your typical response to that?
Well, you know what, Brian, there is no one way to run a laundromat, and there's no one way to live life in general. But laundromats being a subset of life in as a whole. And
Mhm.
I would say that it could be absentee. I think we all probably know of, or maybe have even visited some absentee laundromats, and they're out there, and they may work. They may work for your market. They may work for yourself. There are some downsides in having an absentee laundromat that depending on where you are and what you want out of your business may or may not work for you. So that's something to think about. But I think to Brian's point, in order to be successful, you certainly have to be hands-on. And there will likely become a time if you're in it long enough and you are constantly attending situation or webinars like this, or going to conferences and interacting with other high performing people, that you get systems down that do allow you to be a little bit more hands off. And in some case, maybe totally hands off if you build up your revenue enough where you can pay somebody's going to be hands on. And if you have enough revenue and the right people in place, it doesn't necessarily have to be you.
Yeah, well said. Very well said, Yvette, because like I said, people, go through different, I know people that are 30-year veterans and they show up in the store every day. They want to putter around, they want to fix machines, they want to visit with the customers. But many others, like you said, will add a layer of management that allows them to focus either on pursuing other things or look for that next location, build the next one, build the next one.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of different ways to look at that. But kind of that simplicity, another context for that when I talk to people that are experienced in other businesses, especially retail businesses, is there's essentially no receivables, very little inventory, cash in advance, like a lot of less reliant on employees than a lot of other industries. So there's that part of the simplicity as well. And like I said, the keys to success are kind of out there and understood, maybe not always easy to execute on, but it takes time and energy and attention to do that. So while not entirely passive or absentee, one of the things I hear a lot over the years, Yvette, from our members is kind of those, I call them like lifestyle considerations.
Right.
On the one hand, you're on call, it's open 7 days a week. And so issues come up, you need to attend to them. But I also hear, well, I like to volunteer, or I drive my kids to school, or I coach Little League, or other things that time needs to be put in, but you can, outside of emergencies, you can kind of figure out when you want to spend that time. We have got people that have their day job still, right? They go in early mornings or late nights or catch up on weekends. So, I mean, maybe 2 days aren't the same for you, Yvette, but how would you kind of describe a typical day in a life for you as a 5-store operator?
Well, yeah, that's a great point, Brian. And I would say my time at the stores has evolved over the years. So when I first started and we had the first store, and I would just start this, I should have said this initially. Kudos to each of you that chose to spend time here. In complete transparency, I did not. And I fell in and I think tripped in, hit my head, and got banged up pretty badly. And I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. And I'm happy for you that you've taken the time to join this call, hopefully join the CLA, and just learn as much as you can before you just jump in, because not everybody does that. So I jumped in. Mind you, I had no experience with laundromats. I came from corporate America, and I was ready to do something different. I wanted to have my own place. And I was at the store probably 5 days a week. Mostly, I was there a lot, long
Mhm.
hours. There was no set time for me to be there. I would be there when I needed to be there. Very, very hands-on, designing everything, taking apart every system in the store, what few that existed, and building systems that weren't there, fixing machines, hiring people, cleaning, everything, renting trucks. We rented U-Haul trucks at that location. Very, very busy, very, very hands-on. When we got the second store, pretty much the same. It was a lot. By then, though, I'd had a manager in place and she was doing a great job, and it allowed me to kind of get the second store up and running, but that required time, and I was there a lot as well. Now, not so much. Now we've got more management layers in place. It allows me to be flexible. I'm one of those people Brian mentioned. I like to volunteer a lot, and I do a lot of that. It gives me an opportunity to volunteer. Most of my time now is probably spent doing administrative work. There's a lot of that that goes with it, and depending on how, if you did become a multiple store owner, how you structure your businesses, it could be like for us, we have all different entities, so that's everything times 5. It's a lot to manage those things, but I have time to do that because I don't have to be in the store. I have somebody scheduled for every hour, and allows me to come in and be a floater or to pop in unannounced and to see how things are going. So it's very different though from when I first started to now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really appreciate your transparency. I think that helps a lot of people to hear that. Sometimes you go online, it looks like everybody arrived at the business fully formed and rich and successful. But
Yeah,
for
and
almost
and some
everybody,
people do, and hopefully all of you will.
right,
But
right.
yeah, and kudos to you again for being here.
Yeah, and we do appreciate it and appreciate you telling it like it is. So let me see what else I've got here. So yeah, so the other thing I just added to this list is that while we are seeing more interest from people that are looking to consolidate in the industry, in a couple of fledgling franchises. One of the things I really love about the business is I see our members do this every day. They'll build a world-class laundromat, and they can do it on their own, meaning they don't need to be part of a larger organization. They need to do their homework. They need to find great partners. They need to have a great distributor. They need to do all those things, but you can build a world-class laundromat. It's one of the cool things about the business is that you're in a position to do that. So with that, I'm going to pop back over to the question and answer box, and a couple of you have been patient with questions queuing up here. So Barbara asks, I suppose that landlords have a general idea of what they want in their space. There are locations I've seen that are good location for ingress and egress. How can I get in? So good question. A lot of people will approach landlords via their distributor. Some will use a broker, and some will just knock on doors and inquire about the space. And so we're going to talk some more about leases as we go, because it's an incredibly important component to this industry. But there's some things that you're looking for. Proximity to the need, right? You need to be close in to these low-income renters. You need to have good parking. You need to have an easy ingress and egress, so it's convenient because you want people coming back every week and doing business with you. You're going to need obviously ample space. You're going to need ample utility service to match what your mechanical needs are going to be. But one of the real things that can be limiting is, frankly, sometimes landlords don't want a laundromat. Maybe they had a bad experience with a laundromat tenant back in the day. That comes up from. We see less of that, but it can happen. But one of the other unique aspects for us is that we're asking for very, 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 very long leases, at least in terms of the total duration if all the options are executed. So when we're going to a landlord, Yvette, I don't know what your ask is, but a lot of our members will say, hey, I want 10 years and 2 5-year options, 10 years and 3 5-year options. In other words, 10 or 20 to 25 years total. And a lot of landlords, Yvette, they look at you cross-eyed. They say, well, I'm used to doing 5-year leases or
Right.
3-year leases or 7-year leases. And so sometimes that can limit the number of places that would be open to serving a laundromat.
Absolutely, but don't let that deter you, and certainly don't let that be a place that you sign a lease with, that they'll only give you 5 years and say, oh, this is a great location, I'm going to sign it. Don't do it. Don't do it, because it happens. They see you doing well, and then they remember that their brother-in-law needs a business, and at the end of that 5 years, you're out of there. And you've
Yeah.
paid the fees to get the laundromat up and running, the connection fees, or the fee to install a larger water meter, and then you have no say so at the end of that time period. So make sure you ask for as much time as possible and be willing to pass on a place that doesn't allow it.
It
But I
really
agree. I've
requires
seen some
discipline.
places. I did kind of what you said, Brian. I was one of those people knocking on doors and going, um, well, maybe not literally knocking on doors, more
Sure.
calling phones, calling every phone number I could get to talk to the landlord. And some of them just won't even call you back when they hear laundromat. They have memories of old, dusty, dirty, broken down laundromats, and that's not the image they have for their property. And I know that you won't be that kind of operator, but they're thinking that,
Yeah.
I don't want
Mhm.
laundromat, wrong crowd. But you keep being persistent and you'll find somebody. But it's really important that when you do, you let them know what kind of lease you're going to need, and don't settle for anything that's too short, because that time passes really quickly.
Well, it sure does. And really what we're dancing around is the fact that you can't pick up and move a laundromat, right?
Right.
So everything is bolted in place, everything, all the investment, the infrastructure investment is in that space. And so when your lease is up, you're out of business in so many
Right, and a
cases.
lot of those fees are they're connected to that address. So even if you did find another space and say, "Oh, I found this perfect location," but if there was never a laundromat there, very likely the municipality is going to charge you sometimes cost prohibitive fees to put a new one in. So
Yeah, yeah.
keep
No,
that
we'll,
in
we'll
mind.
definitely touch on some of those
Yeah.
impact fees as we go. And Olga, in response to what you just said, Yvette is saying, it sounds scary to get into a long lease. What happens if it doesn't work? Is it easy to transfer? So um, I'm not saying you need to operate it for 25 years, but you need to be able to have enough runway there. So if it does work out, you want to be able to get through like your debt service period. If you took on debt service to acquire the business and or to purchase equipment, you want to get clear of that where you're guaranteed. And for that matter, they're not going to lend to you if you don't have enough lease time to
Right.
cover those terms. And you also want to have enough runway left where you can sell the business sometime down the road at top dollar. That because an educated buyer, like we're trying to create here this morning, is going to be looking for that time left on a lease. So, um, I see the dual-edged sword that you're referencing, Olga, but the conventional wisdom is to build that time in because someone will operate that going into the future. And in terms of the transferability or assignability of the lease, that's really important fine print to have your attorney look at, do research with us, do research with your distributor about those finer points, because you want to make sure that if you do decide to sell, and a lot of times people sell not because the business is failing per se, but it's there's an illness or a death in the family or another opportunity comes up or something happens and it's not really on a schedule. And you just always want to be able to not only have enough time to offer an educated buyer, but also not be hamstrung by the language of the lease that would make it difficult to transfer or assign the lease. And so it's a good time to mention that at CLA, I do one-on-one consultations all in our network that can help answer questions. We have white papers on leases, videos on leases, webinars, all kinds of information on all these key topics. Olga, your other question was about financing, and so I'm going to talk about some details on financing. It looks like Morgan had a similar question about the cost of getting started. So let's cover a little bit more ground, and I promise that we'll get to that in some detail here. So, all right, what's the catch? Why not laundromats? We said why laundromats. Now we'll talk about maybe why not. So there always are challenges, and I'm going to kind of go through some common ones, and Yvette can kind of backfill with maybe some of the things that she's observed either herself or through peers. One thing that we're finding now, with just so much interest in the industry, is that perfect locations and oftentimes the inventory of laundromats for sale could be scarce. Where the Atlanta market, Yvette, I mean, that's a busy market. And
It
I
really
doubt that
is.
there's 30 laundromats laying around ready to be purchased. It can be a challenge and not just scarce in number, but stores for sale that are at the right price with the right lease, with all the right
All of that.
consideration. So would you agree that you've seen it become a little bit more challenging in some cases to find good locations or stores to buy?
Absolutely, Brian. I agree with all of that. And I probably, like any other laundromat owner, I get letters in the mail weekly, people introducing themselves. Hi, I am such and such. I'm interested in buying a laundromat. If you ever want to sell, give me a call. It's common now, and I would get those periodically in the past, but now it's frequent. I get them all the time, and I'm sure everybody else does. So that just lets me know that it is a hot market. People do want to get in, and we got creative people out there who are willing to do things. And I would say that that's not a bad tactic, because some of them I'll hold on to, because you just never know. I'm not looking to sell right now, but you just don't know when that time may come. To Brian's point, it many times it is unexpected and wasn't like I planned, or whoever planned to sell 10 years from now, or I'm going to sell in, June of 2026. Sometimes people just don't know that, and it becomes a situation where you want to sell. So if you've had that contact with an owner, that would be in, yeah, to your advantage, possibly, as long as it's been a good interaction.
Yeah, I see many examples
Yeah.
of, I knocked on their door 3 years ago, and all of a sudden the current owner called me out of the blue, said that they're ready to retire,
Yeah.
So building your laundry network, getting involved with the association, going to local meetings, building your network really helps in this regard. Stephanie, I do see your question, and I'll get to that in just a sec. Good question. But let me kind of finish this list here. One of the things that Yvette and I were chatting about before we came on live with you is this notion of getting out, putting 2 loads of laundry in your trunk, and getting out and doing laundry everywhere you can. Stop and do laundry, stop and do laundry. And part of that is to see what you like, what you don't like, maybe do a little bit of a competitive analysis, but also just see if this is for you, right? And what I've found is that, maybe not everybody is cut out to deal with the general public. We all have different personalities. We have to kind of know ourselves. And, sometimes when we're operating in tougher neighborhoods, that's a little different experience than what everybody is familiar with. So is there a better way I could put this, Yvette, when it comes to some of the experience that can come up with the general public?
I just think it's a good idea that while you're going through this process, to learn as much as you can about yourself. And that certainly will make it crystal clear if this is something that I want to do. And you can pick what you like about the laundromats that you visit, but some qualities about laundromats are going to be pretty much consistent across them. And you need to know it. And to Brian's point about just interacting with the public, if you have a job where you don't interact with the public and you are not familiar with what that might be like on a day-to-day basis, it can be challenging. So make sure that you understand what that will look like, and understand the importance of having really top-notch customer service. And that means that when people come in and they aren't in a good mood, then you might be on the receiving end of that. And what does that look like, and how does that feel, and how would you handle that? Are you
Right,
equipped to handle that? And if it's
right.
not you, maybe you can decide, this is not me, but I have this attendant who is fabulous at interacting with people. And if you have that, but you will need to know that, because interacting with the public is a really important part of your success as an operator.
No, very well put, Yvette.
Mhm.
That's important. And again, you're going to learn a lot by just getting out and doing a lot of laundry.
I agree.
And I just highly recommend that as a way to get to know what you're up to. So get out and do laundry. And it's really a good way to go. And I'm going to get to this question next for Morgan, and some of the others have been asking about dollars and financing. But just in sheer numbers, most of the people that do have a challenge that I'm working with, it's just a matter of just kind of getting that initial downstroke, right? That initial cash investment together to be able to make that first foray into the business. So when it comes to stores for sale, you can find laundromats for a couple $100,000. You can find them for a few million, right? Depends on the size and how much revenue that they're doing. And but I would say that when it comes to sort of acquisition financing, that's typically a 30, maybe even these days more often closer to 40% cash in hand in order to access financing, whether that's seller financing or through one of the captive lenders that focus on our industry. So that at least gives you some sense of the cash that you're going to need. and we'll talk some more about this as we go along, but this is one of the bullets I wanted to make sure that I share. And, again, trying to tell you like it is. So for a new build out, which in my definition is an existing space, either a vanilla box or something that's being used in a different retail purpose right now, not including the real estate. I think if you start at $300 or $400 a square foot, it's a really good estimate for the leasehold improvements, the build out, the equipment, the installation, and basic cost of trying to get that store together. So yeah, a modest size store or an average based on what I gave you earlier, yeah, it'd be in excess of $1 million for that sort of average store today. And needing to have in most cases at least 30% of that in cash, in the credit worthiness to borrow the balance. And so are there projects that cost more? Yes. Are there projects that cost less? Yes. Anything short of a real quote on a real project is really a guess. But I think if you started at $300 or $400 a foot, in a lot of cases that would kind of dial you in to where you're going to need to be. And again, there's some fluctuation based on geography, based on market demand, and a number of other factors. So I don't want to tell you that the initial cash investment is a big obstacle for a lot of people without giving you some kind of context for what that looks like. And so, Yvette, do those numbers sound somewhat in the ballpark, or was that a challenge for you getting the first store off the ground?
The numbers do sound right, and yeah, I think it's never an easy thing for most people to come up with big amounts of cash. It's takes some planning and hopefully some fortitude and some commitment that started way before the day you sign the lease. You'll need to have some money in hand. People get creative. They get business partners, or they have retirement funds that they use. Some people do home equity lines of credit, which you have to decide what works for you, where you can get cash from, and what you have the stomach for.
No, thanks for sharing that. So again, there's a lot of variables. That's where these distributors come in, and these finance companies that focus on laundries. And I'll add a little bit more color to this as we go along. Stephanie, you've been so patient. Thank you so much. I want to get to your question about your comment is, in targeting a low to middle income area, is it a good idea to have electronic payment machines instead of coin? I'm considering the coin collect process and the occurrence of vandalism. So I'll give the statistical answer, and then I'll let Yvette give you a real world answer to the question on payment. So statistically, now the majority of laundromats are utilizing what we would call a hybrid approach. In other words, they're taking quarters, but also taking credit, debit, loyalty card, and mobile payments, phone payments. Right. So that's the statistical majority now. The number of stores that are quarter only or coin only has dropped to about 30% of the market. On the flip side, only about 15% would be what I would call cashless. And so the balance there in the middle, 55 or so percent would be in that hybrid approach. And so, yeah, there are considerations in terms of cash control, safety, and other things. And so you've been in the business a while now. So I bet you probably have had some evolving interest in looking at different types of payments.
Yeah, all of our stores are hybrid stores.
Okay.
So we do coins. We actually do dollar coins, not quarters, and we do apps. We don't take credit card payments at the machines, but a lot of people do that as well. And I always think that it's interesting when people list safety or concern about theft as a reason to not accept coins, because you're going to store cash somewhere in the store. And if you are using a card machine or card store, they're still putting bills or some type of payment, probably bills at some level, bills or coins in a central place. And that could potentially be a target as well. And I'll say, thankfully, knock on wood, we've had, I've never had a problem with theft. I have had a couple of, and literally a couple of all the coin boxes that we have in 15 years. where coin boxes have been vandalized. And that was very recently. It was one person in one store, and it was two boxes that got messed up. And and they were unsuccessful in getting anything. So we haven't had problems with that, but as you know, as everybody on this call knows, it can happen. It absolutely can happen. But um, statistically, probably not likely to happen to you. And if you have some good things in place, you got security cameras in place. I think also having somebody on site most of the time will eliminate that largely.
Yeah, no, it's good practical advice, Yvette. And there's just some good common sense that you can use with collections, right? Varying the times. Don't pull cash out of the store every Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Where someone that's casing the place can know that. Be discreet when you're removing cash from the store. I remember this like it was yesterday, 20 years ago, going to visit a member. I met them in the parking lot, and he was literally walking out with a bank bag. It's almost like the old cartoons, like they had the sack with the dollar sign on it.
Right,
So
right.
you just got to be smart, and it's good to have imperative to have the video surveillance and either collect with a
Absolutely.
partner or make sure you're on the phone with somebody or that someone's watching the video while you're doing it, and just get into good habits when it comes to collecting cash from the store.
Yeah,
But
Brian, it's interesting. I had our one of our banks encourage me. They tried to get me to take one of their deposit bags. And I'm like, this just screams to me like, hey, there's money in here to your point, like with the dollar sign on. I'm like, no, thank you. I'll pass on that one every time. And I like doing the night deposits, but not with the bag that says to everybody exactly what's in it and where it is.
I've seen members that have fashioned something like out of a detergent box. I've seen people put a false bottom in a toolbox. I've seen people
Mhm.
do anything to kind of just don't draw attention to what you're there to do. And again, varying the times and just being smart with it
Absolutely.
goes a long way. So a couple more questions have cropped up here. Back to Morgan. I hope that answered your question about kind of what you need to get started. I ask a lot of the finance folks and distributors. I just asked this morning, I said, what do you tell people about how much cash you need? 300 to 500,000 is a pretty common answer. But again, it's scaled based on the size of store you're either looking to buy or to build. But that's why I kind of use the per square foot as well as the percentages. And I'll share a few more here as we go along. Um, Anonymous attendee, hi Anonymous, has interest in buying stores changed over time or in recent years? Have you seen private equity interest in the space yet? Concerned with valuation when considering buying my first store, do you have a rule of thumb or preferred range for what kind of multiples to pay? So I've got a slide on valuation here in just a second, Anonymous. Has the interest changed? Yes, there's a high level of interest right now, both from, I will call them like mom and pop individual entrepreneurs. Yes, we have seen some peaked interest from private equity, but not like we've seen in car wash or some of those other industries. We haven't seen a large consolidator enter the space yet. That could very well happen, but it is drawing more attention than ever before. And I'll get back to your rule of thumb on valuation multiples here in just a moment. Diptesh, your question is about wash and fold. What percentage of your business is wash, dry, fold? And then your second question is, there are companies out there that can help you boost wash, dry, fold. So Yvette, what can you tell us about wash, dry, fold in your experience?
Well, we have self-service stores primarily. I
Mhm.
just have one store that has drop off for wash, dry, fold. And that is a huge area for growth right now. And there are a lot of advantages in doing it. CLA recognizes that. We recently had a big wash, dry, fold conference just focused just on that topic. I would encourage you, if you're interested, then certainly keep your eyes open for the next one and plan to attend. There
Mhm.
are pros and cons of doing both. The wash, dry, fold as a percentage of the store where it is it's a relatively small percentage of what we do. We are primarily self-serve
Right.
laundromats. And that's because we've chosen to focus on our self-serve business. But there are reasons to do wash, dry, and fold. It is picking up. You have the ability to attract different demographic, maybe people at a higher income level. And if your geography supports it and you want to do it, I would say do it. Some of the downsides about possibly doing it is the inability to operate without somebody on site. You have to have somebody there, and the reliance then on having reliable attendance, I'm sorry, is it just increases. And you have to have somebody there all the time. So
It
with
does
our
add
self-serve
complexity.
places, yeah, definitely. It makes it a little more complicated, but you can be rewarded if you do that and do it well.
Yeah, no, well said. And so we have members, Diptesh, that it's 0%, some that it's
Mhm.
5 or 10%, and some that are 50% or 60% or more. So it really just depends on how hands-on you want to be, what kind of demographic you're serving, and just understanding that if you go from self-service to what I would call wash, dry, full drop off, meaning people can drop in the store. That adds some complexity. Someone has to be there. Someone has to process the laundry. You need systems, you need tickets, accepting payments, et cetera. Then you add delivery is kind of the next level of complexity, because then you're talking about vehicles and insurance and logistics and routing and all that kind of good stuff, all of which can be quite profitable, but that's the beauty of the business. You can make it as kind of simple or as complex as you choose based on what your needs are. And sometimes that changes over time.
Mhm.
And are there companies out there? Yes, there are a lot of technology providers that have platforms to support wash, dry, fold, everything from printing tickets like you'd see at a dry cleaner to marketing apps, so you can Uber your laundry, so to speak, and also texting customers, taking payments, routing your delivery vehicles efficiently. So there's a lot of support out there. So hopefully that answers your question there. Joe Smith, can you get an SBA loan? These have a 90% advance rate, right? So SBA is an option for sure. I'll get into a slide here in a moment that kind of walks you through some of those other options. But SBA, generally speaking, likes the laundromat business. You definitely need a local banker, very experienced with navigating the process with SBA, because it could be a bit more arduous. But if you can kind of make it through the end of that trail, often it is a lower down payment and perhaps even a better interest rate, but it takes a bit to get there, and you need to find an experienced partner locally that can get you to that point. Okay, well, let's cover a few more slides here, and I see a bunch more questions queued up, so that's wonderful. One of you just asked about valuation, so I'll give you my take on what I see. Hey, more art than science. At the end of the day, it's what will the other person take for the business and what are you willing to offer? Typically valued at a multiple of the annual net. And again, we're not talking about real estate. We're just talking about the business. Historically, most laundromats have sold between 3 and 5 times the net. Is that what they are worth? Maybe, but that's what they sold for. Okay. And that's a wide range that I'll talk about here in a moment. Do stores sell for less? Yes. Are stores selling for more these days? Yes. And valuations, generally speaking, are trending higher, especially for the larger, high-performing stores. But that at least gives you some sense of the operating expense and coming up with a net and then multiplying that out on a multi-year basis. However, again, there's a big range there. And so what are the big factors between something that sells for 2 or 3 times net versus something might sell for 5 or 6 or 7 times net? It's going to really come down to the size of the store and the size of that net income. People obviously like to find larger stores, higher performing stores. Age and condition of the equipment is huge, absolutely huge. And a lot of the stores you'll see for sale, often it's in the context of the current owner or the owner before did not recapitalize the business. In other words, they did not upgrade the equipment. And so therefore they're trying to sell on a multiple of the net. But what you have to consider as the potential buyer is, what, if anything, can I pay for this business knowing that I'm going to have to re-equip it because the equipment is old and decrepit and out of order and just doesn't work. And honestly, that's one of the most common mistakes I've come across in my years in the business is people, paying the asking price for the store and then needing to buy the equipment after the fact. If they were, perhaps misunderstood the age and condition of the equipment. And of course, the lease, we talked about that earlier. If your lease has got 15 or 18 or 20 years remaining, you're going to get a much higher multiple than if you've got 7 or 8 or 10 years remaining. And a lot of stores for sale have some combination of short lease and old equipment. And so you really have to be wary of that and ask those questions early in the process. So you can see some variation there for sure. Another thing I like to point out is that buying a cash business is not like buying another type of business. The due diligence is really critical and can be more challenging in the case where the seller may not have good records or maybe has been underreporting their income or some other things that might be going on. But again, that's something we've got videos, white papers, one-on-one advice we can give you on due diligence. And again, is this the best store in the market you're trying to buy? Is it the worst store in the market you're trying to buy? Are there 5 stores within a mile, or there's not a store for 10 miles? These are all things that are going to sort of fold into what the seller is looking for and what you might be willing to pay for the business. So, Yvette, any thoughts you want to add on the topic of valuation?
I would just add that in addition to everything that you said, there are going to be some markets where it's just harder to get into. So while this is very good and it's logical, sometimes if you want a place and they're asking a little bit more, you can make that decision. Do I want to get in, or do I want to sit on the sidelines and wait and see what if?
Mm-hmm.
And how much will I lose out by waiting, or how much will I lose by jumping in? But it really does become a personal decision too. So I would say that take this as a guide and follow your gut and your heart as well.
No, well said. And I talk to people a lot about everyone's going to make mistakes. We try to mitigate that, minimize those for you based on the research. However, if you had to make a mistake, if you had to choose a mistake you could recover from, it's probably overpaying for a store. What you can't recover from is a lease issue that you got, insufficient time left on the lease. You can't very easily recover from that. And when it comes to the age and condition of the equipment, again, I mentioned that earlier, that is something that's really hard to recover from. I bought the business, now I need to buy the equipment. Even though I thought it was good enough, or I'd get a few more years out of it, you have to do the math, right? And play that out. So no one wants to overpay, and I'm not recommending overpaying, but like Yvette said, sometimes the opportunity presents itself. And when I've had friends in the business that have paid up a little bit on a store, they never regret it because they know they're going to get those dollars back for the years to come. So the fatal issues relate to leases and a store full of old equipment. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Yes, we will be sharing the slides. Manan Patel, can we repeat how they are using coins? So what Yvette was describing was a hybrid reader that in her case takes dollar coins. They also can take quarters. And then there's also a card swipe, right? So you can swipe a credit or debit card, and some of those also have the ability to take a mobile payment, like a phone payment. So it's the philosophy that some of those folks are taking is, I want to take all forms of payment, however the customer might want to pay. And so that is now the majority of stores are some version of that hybrid approach. And there are many vendors that have different types of payment systems that are phone-based only, that are card only, that are obviously just coin drops and coin slides for taking quarters and or dollar coins. And so again, that website, laundryassociation.org, we've got a directory of all those different types of payment system providers that can give you a full array, and that local equipment distributor would also be very familiar with the various options that are available to you along the way. AJ, Yvette, he's asking, how do you find a good attendant?
Oh, boy.
Oh, we need another hour.
Yeah, finding good attendants are it really is an art to it, I believe. We post positions on Indeed, or we've done Facebook postings, we put doors, and many times our best attendants come from previous customers or current customers or a referral from somebody. And our manager will, often comments that I watched her, and it's usually women. The majority of our attendants are women, but she said I watched her interact with the customers while she was in here, and I watched how she interacted with me, and that's why I selected her. And when we get people that you have an opportunity to see in action and to make sure that that customer service level is going to be something that you want, then you're more likely to have a good attendant. But we've done it all. We've gone online. We've done the signs in the stores. I probably shy away from signs in stores lately, because in my experience, the downside for that tends to be a little bit higher. If you have people that apply that you would never in 10,000 years give a job to, and we've had that where people have applied over and over and over again when they've seen that sign. I always become concerned about potentially losing a customer, but I love them as a customer, but maybe not, don't think that they'd be a really good fit as an attendant. So it's you just have to balance that. But I would say definitely for referrals or current customers, and then an Indeed or some other online source is good as well.
Yeah. Again, good, practical, real world advice from Yvette. She's been there, she's done that, and she's had that experience. Let's see here. It's kind of related to this topic. Carly, your question is, do you have an example of someone taking over a zombie mat and turning it around for a profit within 6 months? Okay. Well, a lot of the considerations we've just talked about have really applied to this. So Carly, it's going to have a lot to do with what are you paying for the business? And then how much does it going to cost to convert it from a zombie to a fully functioning, professional, clean, bright, well-equipped, functioning store? And so if we put aside the debt service, and operating net income can certainly be achieved in that time. And there's a lot of great success stories of taking distressed locations and turning them around. But there's no two ways getting around the fact that it does need to be recapitalized. And I've had a series of new members here of late that are saying, well, Brian, I can get this store for $200,000 or $300,000. I say, okay, well, have you gotten a quote on what it's going to cost to re-equip the store? Because that might be as much or more or even double to re-equip it as what you're being asked to pay for it, right? So, I can get a steal on this store, I can get it for $200,000, and then I encourage them to go get a quote on equipment, and the equipment replacement is $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000, $800,000. So it all comes down to the math and what you can afford to pay for the business, if anything. Take into consideration what it's going to take to finance the re-equipping of the store, knowing that you're going to have to put 30% down probably on that equipment loan, and the ability to, what is the potential for that business to grow? So the general sense of your question is right on. Stores that are lousy and get cleaned up and re-equipped and run better can double, triple, quadruple, quintuple their top line sales. But there's the catch is, got to have the right lease, you got to pay the right price for it, and you have to be able to afford to re-equip it. Anything you would add to that, Yvette?
No, and you hit it all, and we actually did that. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. We have an example of a store that was a zombie mat, and within 6 months, it was covering all of its costs. That included debt service, and we were profitable at the end of that time. But it depends on a lot, how much equipment you have to buy. It wasn't a huge store, so I think that probably would have been negatively impacted had it been a store where we did twice the amount of equipment, and the equipment costs nowadays are more than they were even maybe
Right,
70 years
right.
ago too. So I don't
Mhm.
know if we could repeat that same feat, but it certainly is doable if you take into consideration all of the factors that Brian mentioned. And how much can you increase that? What are you going to do with marketing? How many people do you need to have working there? Because that's going to affect your your profitability. So outside of our leases and water, payroll is, or payroll is probably all the time. Every time it's going to be more than our rent, every place we operate. So it's a huge amount. How many people will you need to run it?
No, very good point. Very good point. And I'm putting my email address in the chat for those of you that were asking if you need to reach us. Um, I can make those connections. Okay, a couple more questions queued up, but I'm going to click through a few more slides here because time flies when you're having fun.
I know, right?
And the good news is that we've covered a lot of these topics already, but it's a good opportunity to kind of circle back. So when it comes to the financing options, um, we've touched on a couple of these things. A conventional lender, if you're a small business person, already have a relationship, most certainly reach out to your local banker and look for ways to work together. If you want to go the SBA route, you need to find that local bank that has an SBA expert. I call it an SBA Sherpa, who's going to guide you through that process. But the majority of the financing in our business comes through what I will call captive lenders. In other words, laundromat specific lenders that are often owned by one of the manufacturers or have a real specialty in the laundromat business. In other words, they help finance the purchase of their equipment, maybe like a car dealer, right? Would offer financing for the purchase of a vehicle. And so because conventional lenders don't do a lot of small business lending or micro businesses like ours, perhaps, and they certainly don't know a lot about laundromats. Our industry had to kind of be self-sufficient and kind of create its own ecosystem for financing, and that's where a lot of the deals get done. Particularly if there's a new equipment element, you can imagine a lender would feel more confident, in part, collateralizing a loan with the equipment that they manufacture. That God forbid, if they had to take it back, they can remarket it, they can recoup. They'd rather not do that, but if they had to, that could be a situation that you encounter. Increasingly, because of the way the market has changed, most of these same companies are now offering some version of acquisition lending. You can imagine that it's easier to access if you're also doing some equipment replacement as part of that acquisition, right? Especially if it's their equipment that's going in, it'd be natural to be the case. I see a lot online that references seller financing, folks, and it's great when you can find it. There are circumstances where you can find it, but don't think that that's a regular, easy to find aspect. Years ago, yes. Nowadays, most sellers are looking for cash buyers and aren't necessarily looking to do seller financing. So it's kind of the exception to the rule in my observations these days. But I just don't want people thinking that that's a primary manner of financing a business. You can find it, but it's not there every single day. And of course, you're going to have to friends, partners, your own 401k, whatever. People tend to have to sort of cobble together that first project, pull in resources from multiple places. Do you think I missed anything on that list?
No, you hit the nail on the head. And I would say it's funny you talk about seller financing. You do hear a lot about that. And I think often, like, who would I seller finance to? And I really can't come up with anybody that I'd be willing to do it for. So maybe my son, maybe down the road. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I agree
I see that in
that's a
multi-generational businesses. You're right.
yeah,
That would be an
that's kind of a
exception.
unicorn out there if you can find it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the examples I'm thinking of, which are few, lately are situations where the records are terrible and the due diligence didn't go well. And as part of trying to make the deal happen, the buyers requiring the seller to carry paper. So they've got skin in the game to better assure themselves. But
Right.
I would not rely on that. Okay. yeah, reiterating that the slides will be shared and recording. Yes, we'll do that. What's your experience with maintenance of machines? Can you do it yourself? What's the cost of a service tech? How often should you clean machines? Yvette, I know you've kind of gone through an evolution when it comes to equipment maintenance, including getting good with the screwdriver yourself. So what would you tell folks about the maintenance part of this business?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of my own repairs for years, and that was not because I had a background in doing it, but really it was born out of necessity initially, and interest also. But when you spend a lot of time in a place, it does afford you the time to do it. And if you have the ability to hire somebody and they can show you, then the next time that same repair is needed and you've paid attention and you have the right tools, then you can probably do it on your own. So it depends on what your stomach is for it. I did a lot, and then I realized that at some point I can't continue to grow if I'm here with a screwdriver and a drill all the time. It's only so many hours in a day. So we do that. It's expensive though. I think that that's a often overlooked expense. And when you are buying a place, make sure that that's accounted for as you're looking at the expense numbers, because in my experience, it's understated often between the parts and the time. And if you have an owner who's doing all the repairs and you have no desire to do the repairs, or you cannot do the repairs, you're going to want to factor in that. Even brand new equipment is going to require some level of servicing and repairs. So while the manufacturers give you great warranties on parts, that the warranty that covers any type of service is very, very short, even for brand new equipment. So somebody's going to need to change a water valve or do something. Something's going to need to be done pretty quickly, and it's expensive. I think it really depends on your market, how much you're paying. Right now, we are at the place where we've hired a maintenance person that works just for us, and that was a way for us to help control the costs and kind of smooth it out. Because if you're bringing in somebody, I've seen costs as high as, $300 really for them to cross the threshold, and then it's by hour, depending on what kind of work that they're
Right.
going to be doing. So it can get really expensive really quickly.
Yeah, no, she's telling the truth, folks. That's exactly right. And as people do get into multiple stores, they often will put on a full-time technician, and that it seems to be like that 4 or 5 store mark
Yeah.
where people tend to bring somebody on full-time for themselves. And you're absolutely right. When I look at a lot of deals, and people tend to get focused on trying to verify the income on a store that they're buying. And yes, you should absolutely verify
Mhm.
the income. But I would say even more so, people tend to understate the expenses when they're selling their business. And 1,000% agreement here, Yvette. They understate the cost of repairs and maintenance because they're doing it themselves, number one, and they don't put them all those expenses in place. So good advice, folks. So let's get into a couple more things I wanted to share, and we're going to get into the last group of questions. So profitability insights. I pull these right from our annual survey. And I just want to give some context to, because people are like, how much can these make? How much can these make? How much can laundromats make? Well, let me do it the other way. Let me look at the expense side of this thing. And this comes from our benchmarking and best practices through the association. So most of these costs are fixed, right? Even to a large extent, in Yvette's case, she's trying to convert her repair and maintenance cost to something that's a little bit more fixed than variable. Variable costs are utilities, water, sewer, gas, and electric. The more you wash, the more utilities you use. So the efficiency by which your machines operate is really important. So I think these days with new equipment, people are targeting more like 15 to 20% cost of utilities versus top line sales, gross revenue. The statistical average is now right about 20%. If you're looking at older stores to purchase, do this math early in the process, okay? You're going to see 30%, 32%, 35% if it's a store full of old equipment. And on the one hand, that's a challenge, big challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And that'll be part of your math and re-equipping, right? Is the ability to bring that down to 15%. So keep that in mind. Rent, I think most people target 20%, maybe feel like they can go as high as 25% versus gross sales. The statistical average right at 24% for rent. Payroll, I think most people try to keep it in that 15 to 20% range, but increasingly labor has gotten more expensive and maybe not everybody's keeping up on the VEN prices in order to compensate for that. So these are really the main expenses. We can talk about insurance and supplies and janitorial and of course repairs and in parts as we just talked about. But these are your main ones, and these are the things that go a long way toward determining if you're going to be successful or not. Okay. So a couple more slides here, and then I'll finalize with the questions. So with the strong asterisk, this comes right from our benchmarking survey. And yes, it is tied back to the 2,850 square foot store as a cross tabulation. Okay. The statistical mean, it's good when the mean and the median are close, right? That means your survey is doing pretty well. So that 2,850 square foot store would be grossing about 335,000. There's plenty of stores that gross 50,000. There's stores that are 40,000 a week, 50,000 a week on the very, very high end of the scale. So every store is different. They're differing means. And when it comes to the net profitability, according to our survey, puts that mean and that median right in that tight range in excess of 25%. I see a lot of people that will talk about net operating margins being as high as 40%. Absolutely, I see that all the time. But here's what the average says. Here's what the statistical average says. And of course, that's before any debt service. So, that's just a resource and an encouragement, frankly, to join the association because you get the benchmarking survey as part of your membership. And every single topic we've talked about, we have white papers, videos, and one-on-one assistance on all of these topics. So you don't have to guess. As I like to say, joining the association is like getting your undergrad, your bachelor's degree in laundromats. Give yourself a base of knowledge, and then you can build what you know from there. Top line industry growth. I just let this speak for itself. We know what happened in 2020, but it's just been a very steady, reliable business at the top line. Of course, expenses have grown over that time. Equipment costs more, utilities cost more, labor costs more. But industry has just been very slow, steady, positive growth with just a handful of exceptions, which of course in that case was the pandemic. I'm not going to read this back to you, but this is a common question that comes up that you can see when we share with you the recording and the slides. Buy versus build. It depends. There are pros and cons to both approaches. And my advice, Yvette, is always let each deal live and die on its own merits. Buy versus build. It could be a good deal to buy. It could be a good deal to build if the location is strong enough. I wonder how you have approached that buy versus build in your career.
Well, for me, I really have targeted areas and then looked for places in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was something that was available that made sense, then we would buy it. But if not, then we would build it and just kind of make the numbers work. Or make sure the numbers work before we went forward.
It all comes down to the math.
Yeah, but as with most things, location, location, location. You can't make a bad location. You can't build it nice enough to make it be a good location. So you want to make sure that you're in the right place. And then from there, you got to decide, do you have the budget? It's probably going to cost you a lot more money to build it.
That's for sure.
But it can also be more rewarding too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. No, that's excellent. So I'll let you kind of mull that over. If I haven't beaten up the lease topic enough already, here's one more slide that talks about the leases. It's got to be right. The lease has to be right. Affordability, duration, fine print, and just think about it as a cash flowing asset that is protected by a lease for a finite number of period of years. and you have to be able to see that. And before you make some of these big decisions, if the lease isn't right, it's a moot point. All the other questions that we're asking are really aside the point if the lease isn't absolutely right. And so please follow some of this advice, some of these guidelines, ask questions. Your distributor can help you. I can help you. Again, we've got great resources to help on this very important topic. So any last words on leases, Yvette? Or
I
we
would say
covered it
this
all?
is not the place where you want to skimp. You want to pay somebody. So in addition to getting input from your distributor and from CLA and maybe other laundromat owners, if you know it, at the end of the day, I think it would be money well spent to hire somebody who is well-versed, an attorney who's well-versed in leases, and to make sure that they're looking at it from their perspective, from your perspective, because you'll be paying them, you'll be the client, and make sure that something important has not been overlooked, because you're never going to have a stronger bargaining position than before you sign that lease.
1000% correct. And don't be afraid to give your attorney, they might be offended, give them the white paper from CLA. Give them some of the industry specific elements about commercial leases. There's a lot that they are going to know, but they have to really understand the laundromat perspective, particularly like on initial build out, like leasehold improvements and where there's tenant support that could be available, let alone the duration that's involved. So share
Right.
out the resources, help them get coached up. You can't say that there aren't resources available about the business, right? We've shared a lot of things through the association. Our YouTube channel has 400 videos, I think it is, in climbing. We have an FAQ section on there that I recorded that cover all these main topics. So there's a lot available. And when it comes to investing in yourself for this endeavor, as I like to say, spend a few $100s before you spend a few $100,000. Our memberships start at $5.99. Get your bachelor's degree for $600. Everyone who joins the association automatically gets a link to my personal calendar to book a consultation. There is no excuse to not have all the information on board and make good decisions, and we can certainly help you along the way. We have a great Facebook group. There are a lot of Facebook groups out there. We happen to have our own as Laundromat Professionals Network. And once you get into the business, we do have other resources that we bring to the table for our members. So we have a great insurance program. We can help you negotiate on electricity and gas contracts, depending on the deregulation in your state, marketing support. So what we try to do is, sometimes being a small business owner can be pretty lonely. You're kind of doing in business for yourself, by yourself. And so we try to be an extension of that as an association that you can turn to and rely on. Very important. We are launching an in-person training. If this 90 minutes was helpful to you, how about a full day? With a bunch of experts where we can talk you through all these considerations. So go to the website and learn some more about this opportunity coming up in November. We're going to repeat this again in the spring, but take advantage, invest in yourself, and put yourself in the best possible position to make a good decision. As I said, we're an association, we're a member-based organization, so please take advantage. We'll follow up with some more opportunities for you to join and save. We bring that down by $100 because we're so appreciative that you stuck with us for 90 minutes and took the opportunity to start your industry education. There's just a lot of great resources that are out there for you. Thank you. We've got like 4 minutes to go, so let me see if I can get a couple more things in here based on your questions. How do you find your maintenance person, tech person? Boy, that's not easy, is it, Yvette, to find a great repair person?
It can be challenging. It can be challenging. So you have to maybe kiss a few frogs before you find the prince. But
you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, you really have to look for these independent technicians. You got to try them out, and hopefully they'll be supporting you and they'll be in a position to help you along the way. Another question that came in here is budgeting for repair and maintenance as a percent of revenue. Do you have new machines? Do you have old machines?
Yeah.
I tend to say 5 to 8% of gross, but again, it really depends on how handy you are. If you have a full-time technician that you're paying, because it can really vary quite a bit. Does CLA have a list of vendors for financing? Yes, you go on our website, our directory, you'll be able to find those companies that do that type of lending that we just talked about. Thank you, Andrew, for adding links in to this stuff. As I say them, it magically appears in the chat. Thank you so much, Andrew. AJ is asking about figuring out utilities when there's wash, dry, fold involved. It's a lot harder. It's a lot harder because that top line revenue per pound of clothes washed is higher. So that if you are looking to buy a store that's heavy on wash, dry, fold, you really have to dig that much deeper to understand what the utilities are related to self-service versus wash, dry, fold. It's just a lot harder to do that in that regard. And really, it's a matter of just trying to better understand what they're up to. Ideally, they've got good records of their wash, dry, fold. They're tracking how they're paying for it internally, whether it be on a coin basis or on an attendant card, let's say, to activate machines. So it is more complex, AJ, for sure, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So I'm sure you join me in thanking the incredible Yvette Morton Williams for spending all this time with us, sharing on an open book basis. Yvette, you're the best. Thank you so much for sharing. And I know it really helped a lot of the folks here this morning.
Well, I hope so. It is my pleasure. I always enjoy spending an afternoon with you, Brian, and all of you that I can't see, but I know you're out there. Thank you for joining. Hopefully I will get a chance to meet you if you come to the conference in November. I'll be there, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. We'll let you go for now, but we look forward to being part of your laundromat journey. Let us know how we can help, and we'll talk to you down the road.